What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right. So let me say this from the get go, okay? This isn't a video asking who is the greater player, who is the best. You don't need to write a comment saying this is why LeBron is greater than. This is not what I'm talking about, okay? You can disagree with my take, that's fine, but let's not change the argument into something that it's not, okay? It's not about which one of these three is the greater player. The question I'm asking is, which one of these three players had the greatest individual championship run of the three? Of course, LeBron James has won 4 championships. He won two with Miami in 2012 and 2013. Of course, the championship run in Cleveland in 2016 and with the Lakers in 2020. Kevin Durant, of course, with 2 championships, one in 2017, the other in 2018, back to back, Finals MVP both times. LeBron, I might as well mention, won Finals MVP 4 times. Kawhi Leonard has 2 championships, 2014, and then of course in 2019. Both times he won Finals MVP. Though the first time he was just starting to emerge uh, on his way to becoming the Kawhi Leonard that we know and admire as a basketball player. And he came full circle in 2019. Now, of these guys' championship runs, which one is the most impressive? Well, to me, it's Kawhi Leonard's in 2019. Now, LeBron and the Miami Heat won 2 championships, of course, back to back, 2012, 2013. The knock on them has always been that they were a super team that came together, um, most notably on LeBron's end because he had problems in Cleveland, attracting the free agents that he needed to be able to vanquish a team like the Boston Celtics. So ultimately, he took advantage of free agency, went to Miami, which may have just been even a more desirable place to play and live. Teamed up with Chris Bosh, who was coming off a 24 point, 10 rebound season, might have been 11 rebound season with the Toronto Raptors. And Dwayne Wade was still close to his prime at that time. Now, Miami was coming off a season where they lost in the first round against their shared rival, Boston Celtics. So some people take that away from LeBron James' legacy a little bit. And also, as that Boston Celtic team began to get older by 2012, there really wasn't any competition in the Eastern Conference against Miami. This is when the Eastern Conference started their slide and became the Eastern Conference. Uh, Maybe the only real opponents you can think of were token uh, opposition by a 60-win Atlanta Hawks team, even though it was later on, actually. I think after. Matter of fact, I'm not even going to mention that team. The token opposition was maybe Paul George's Indiana Pacers, ultimately DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry, but they really didn't have any competition. The Bulls could have been competition, but ultimately, of course, the injury to Derrick Rose broke up that team. LeBron James, of course, had two other championship runs, 2016, 2020. A lot of people take away from the 2020 championship because of the bubble, no road games, uh, no crowds, uh, you know, just not the same type of pressure in that situation that you would have in a normal circumstance. So a lot of people put and I'm not doing it, but a lot of people ding put an asterisk by it, whatever. So a lot of people come to the conclusion that LeBron's greatest championship run is in 2016. So let's just go with that one. Now, Kevin Durant, of course, won two championships, 2017, 2018. Finals MVP both times. Now, you could make the argument that maybe 2017 should be looked upon as the more impressive one, even though a lot of people say the deck was stacked because he joined Hall of Famers in Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, and even though I don't see him as a Hall of Famer, Draymond Green. Um, but in 2018, the Cavaliers were no longer with the services of Kyrie Irving. He had been traded to Boston before the season started. So ultimately, I guess you would go with 2017. Now, with Kawhi Leonard, of course, 2014, that was a great San Antonio Spurs team. They were going up against a Miami Heat team that was uh, great. But Kawhi Leonard was still not quite Kawhi Leonard yet. He did have some decent scoring games, but he wasn't quite Kawhi Leonard. So we'll go with the 2019 championship run with Kawhi Leonard. Now, of the championship runs, 2016 for LeBron, 2017 for Durant, 2019 for Leonard. Which one was the greatest of the two? Of the three, and to me, it's 2019 with Leonard. First of all, he got traded to a team that he didn't ask to go to. Um, got traded out of the country actually. Went to the Toronto Raptors, and a lot of people had issues with their strategy, which was he only ended up playing in some 60 games of the regular season. He didn't play in back to backs. Many people uh, tried to put up the fact that in the games that he missed, the Raptors had a better win percentage than the games that he played in. Although that's misleading because in the 22 games that he missed, they came against largely bad teams. But obviously the strategy worked because it saved Kawhi Leonard's knees for the most part. He played throughout the entirety of the playoffs, even though toward the end you could see the effects of constant playing every other day or so was having on his knees. He started beginning to limp a bit by the NBA Finals. But you look at the run. First of all, they played against the Orlando Magic in the first round. The Orlando Magic wasn't your typical. I believe Toronto was the first seed that year. So Orlando wasn't your typical AC. Orlando had won something like 11 straight games going into 11 or 13. I can't remember the total anymore, but 11 or 13 consecutive games going into the playoffs. Orlando also had the best defensive rating in the second half of the season of any team in the NBA. So they weren't your typical AC. They were a very tough out. If I remember correctly, I think they dropped game two to Orlando. Now, ultimately, um, the Raptors were able to overcome Orlando, and I don't remember many of those games even being blowouts, even though the Raptors were winning. Those games were competitive, so this wasn't an easy out. You know what I'm saying? Then in the next round, you could kind of almost look at it as a revenge with the quality of that series. It was the revenge or the sequel to that great 2001 series that we saw against the Sixers and the Raptors, with the stars at that time being Allen Iverson and Vince Carter. That series going seven down to the wire, and it came down to a Vince Carter turnaround fall-away jumper that was, I believe it went long, I think it was, and Ultimately, the Sixers advanced by a hair. This time, Kawhi Leonard got revenge for the Sixers, revenge for the Raptors, excuse me. That series went 7 games. It went down to the wire, the last possession. Kawhi Leonard, an impossible shot. It rattles around, goes in, and ultimately eliminates the Philadelphia 76ers. And Kawhi had one hell of a series. I think he averaged something like 31 or 32 points a game in that series and eliminated the demons of Vince Carter. In the Eastern Conference Finals, they played the Milwaukee Bucks, who many people felt were the favorites. Now that I think about it, the Raptors, I think, were the second seed, which meant Orlando was the second, seventh seed. So I take that back. Orlando was the seventh seed. Milwaukee was the first seed. Milwaukee had won something like 60 or 61 games during the regular season. And this was the year that many people, including myself, thought they had a shot to make it to the NBA Finals. After going up 2-0, the Raptors backdoor swept them, and they were the ones that introduced the defensive scheme and how to neutralize Giannis, which would plague him for 2 years in a row until they figured out how to play against that, the dreaded wall. And then ultimately in the NBA Finals, they played a Warriors team that were without Kevin Durant for most of that series, with the exception of maybe about a quarter, until unfortunately he did tear his Achilles, and then ultimately Clay was out. All right, so that is in many people's minds an asterisk, but we have to remember something. The Raptors themselves were without some players due to injury. If I remember correctly, Fred VanVleet, didn't he miss a game because of the birth of his child? Now, afterward, he came back and he was playing, he was on fire, sensational. But they were, the Raptors themselves were suffering from injuries. And as I mentioned earlier, Kawhi Leonard was suffering the ill effects of constantly playing and limping around. He was slowed a bit. He was hobbled a little bit, but ultimately he still was able to perform. He was able to still make clutch baskets, and ultimately they won a championship. Now I'm not saying each one of these, any of these championships are perfect. They benefited from injuries. They benefited from calls. They benefited from in one situation, from a suspension. But to me, the most impressive championship run was by Kawhi Leonard. Matter of fact, I think you could put it up there because he didn't play with a super team. You could put it up there with Giannis's. It's close to it. Not quite, but it's up there with Giannis as far as an individual championship run. But tell me what you think. Do you agree with me, or do you have your own take on this? And I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But tell me what you guys think.